Welcome everyone. We are live from Apex One in Westfield, New Jersey. This is week 2 of the Super GT League. We are live racing at Circuit Zolder for week 2. All drivers are currently in the 15-minute qualifying session. This is the first session of the day. Right now, we are looking on board with Eric. Eric is one of the newer competitors, Eric Waters that is. He is driving that beautiful, super sleek and almost prototype looking Autobox Arta Garaya that you see there. Eric is currently sitting in pole with the 157, although qualifying has just begun, so we'll definitely be seeing all the lap times go down throughout the session. But as you can see, someone having a big spin there. Believe that might have been Cole. No, that was Seamus. Seamus has a spin. So we actually have 3 drivers competing in the Subaru that you see here. Seamus is the first of those, and he is driving the Subaru Legacy. This is the Legacy from 2009. There was 2 versions of this car available to drivers in the league. There was a rear-wheel drive as well as an all-wheel drive. 3 of the competitors have decided to all go with the all-wheel drive versions. So that'll be Seamus, as you see right there. We also have Brian competing in the Legacy. And then our last competitor in the Legacy will be Cole. So those 3 drivers, all choosing the same car. But there was a big variety of cars to choose from. Some of the other cars on the grid include this Lamborghini Murcielago. This car is driven by Keith Dempsey, currently sitting in second in the qualifying session. At the moment, Max is sitting in first in the Subaru BRZ. This is the most modern car, I think, out of all of them. This is a 2012 Subaru BRZ GT300 car, of course. Max will be manning the wheel of this car for the duration of the league. We're in week 2 of 5 right now, so 3 more weeks to go after this. But Max dominated week 1. Just going to pull up the results and standings in my side view right here. So week 1, we had 2 races, just like we will for this week. In race 1, Elian took the win in the 2008 Toyota MRS. Just behind him was Max, claiming second. And then in the second race, Max took pole position, ended up finishing the race in first, and I believe he also got 2 extra points for fastest lap. So it was a very successful outing for Max. Week 1 was at Red Bull Ring National, and after week 1, Max is currently the leader of the driver standings with 47 points. Behind him is Elian with 35, and then we have Keith in third with 33, followed by David with 25, and then Seamus with 24. But right now, Max is ahead of the pack by an entire second, and then Keith is ahead of the third place driver by half a second. That third place driver is David De Leon, rocking the Porsche 911 996 for the league. That is, to be exact, it is the 996 from 2007. So there you see beautiful livery there from David. Big rear wing at the back of the car, but overall a pretty sleek design, much less visible aero in comparison to some of these other GT300 cars. But at the moment, David is taking the Porsche for third place to start race 1, if the results hold. But we still have some other very strong competitors that are currently in the middle of the pack, as well as near the back. One of those guys is Eric Bustillos. Eric is driving the Nissan 350Z for this league. At the moment, Eric's in 5th with a 135.6. Eric would need to improve on his lap time by 2/10 in order to overtake Brian for P4, and he is also 2/10 ahead of Elian, who is just behind him in P6. Gonna go on board with Elian now. So Elian is driving that Toyota MRS. There you see him with the Lightning McQueen livery. But just like Max, Elian had a pretty successful outing in week 1. As I previously mentioned, race 1, Elian took the win. Race 2 wasn't as fortunate. He ended up finishing in 5th after a 5-second post-race time penalty from a collision earlier in the race. But despite that result, Elian is still looking pretty good in the driver's standings, currently in 2nd with 35 points, and behind Max by 12 points. But a huge collision ahead. We missed it, although I did see the red indicators in the timing board. That looks like a 3-way incident between Brian, Eric, and I believe a third driver who I don't know, did not see the name of. Eric just had a spin. Eric is off into the gravel. There you see the huge patch of sands. That'll be a huge hindrance to some of these drivers if they end up missing that turn. That's going to cost you a ton of time. But that is the last chicane of the circuit. So definitely one of the harder turns out of the entire circuit. But it's not too long of a track. As you see, the lap times fall just over a minute and a half. But at the moment, Max continues to lead the pack by 0.8 of a second. Keith remains in 2nd. David remains in 3rd, followed by Brian and then Eric. There you see Cole going off into the gravel. Again, another tricky point in the track there for many of these drivers. And there's a lot of risk there to take. If you miss that apex, like I said, you're off into the gravel. You're looking at least a few seconds lost in terms of lap times. But just as I say that, Seamus also goes off into the gravel. Elian is in the pits at the moment. Eric Waters is currently getting back out on track. Eric is at the moment qualified in 9th with a 138.395. Eric would need to improve on his lap time by just 600ths in order to jump over Cole for P8. Keith is also off track in the Murcielago. That'll kill his lap time that he was on. And I think this lap will also be killed because he's going to have a slower start down the start-finish straightaway. And David is now in first. David put up a 133.437. That is enough to beat out Max by 0.2 of a second. At the moment, David is looking at pole position for the start of race 1. Still 3.5 minutes left to go plus overtime though. So there is time for all drivers to make up their times and move further up the starting grid order. But Elian and Eric continue to struggle here at Zolder. Elliott is in 7th at the moment with the 135.8. It's definitely below his usual expectations here in these league competitions. We're usually seeing Elliott in the top 3, if not in the lead. But there we see him going off track once again. That'll kill his current lap time. And now he only has just under 3 minutes to improve on his lap. He would need to improve by at least 0.2 to overtake Eric for P6. But similar to Elliott, Eric is also a little further back in the pack in comparison to where he usually is. We're usually seeing Eric in the top 5 and usually in the top 3. Right now sitting in 6th with the 135.6. So we're going to go on board with Eric now as he completes the lap. His predicted time is a 135.4. We're going to see if he's able to get that, and he is. Eric will cross the line with the 135.4, improves by 0.2. That won't be enough to gain him any positions. He still needed to gain 0.3 over Seamus, who's ahead of him in 5th. But that does give him a slightly greater cushion between himself and Elliott, who's behind him now by 0.4 of a second. But Elliott is currently out on track. I don't know if this is an out lap or a hot lap, but the time is running out. Just over a minute and a half left. David is still sitting in P1. We have Max in P2 and then Keith in P3. The gap between Keith and Brian has also shrunk. Brian is now just 1/10 behind Keith. Apologies for the sudden cutoff. It's just helping one of our drivers get all situated. But the qualifying session is just about done. Only 10 seconds remaining. Elliott did improve his lap time by 0.2, but it was not enough to overtake Eric. Had Eric not improved on that last lap time that he did, Elliott would be looking at P6. But with Eric improving by 0.2, that was enough to keep him ahead of Elliott. Elliott is currently on his final lap of the session. At the moment, though, he's looking at a 134.6 predicted lap time, which would jump him way ahead of the grid. We'll see if he's able to beat Brian's lap time of a 34.4. He is not able to do so, but is able to overtake Eric as well as Seamus. Elliott put up a 34.497, which was just 0.03 slower than Brian's lap time, which puts Brian in 4th, Elliott in 5th. But Brian has now crossed the line. Brian does not improve on his lap time, which means he'll remain in 4th to start race 1. But David claims pole position with a 133.4. Max also is pretty well ahead of the rest of the pack along with David. Max has a 133.6. Those two drivers are the only two that were able to break into the 33s, and were able to do so by a few tenths. So we'll definitely be looking out for those two at the start of the race. Hopefully, for their own sake, they'll be able to get ahead of turn 1 and get far ahead of the pack. But Keith is in 3rd, although he is just about 7 to 8 tenths behind Max in terms of lap times. And then 3rd third place all the way down to fifth place. Third, fourth, and fifth are all fairly close in lap times. Sixth and seventh between Seamus and Elian are also close in lap times. Those two drivers just separated by 0.2 of a second. But Eric ends up overtaking Cole to qualify in eighth. Eric put up a 137.6 in the auto box, and then Cole will be starting race 1 in ninth place. Cole put up a 138.3 in the Legacy all-wheel drive. But that is the end of the qualifying session. We will now have a 3 to 4 minute break before we begin race 1. So just a reminder of the format here for our Super GT League. The drivers just concluded a 15-minute qualifying session, and then now they have a short break period, and then they will soon jump into race 1. Race 1 is a 25-minute race, and it will be weighted. You know, the point system is pretty standard, very similar to like what you'd see in F1 in terms of points. But after race 1 ends, the drivers will have another like three-ish minute break, and then after the break, they will begin race 2. So race 2 will be the same format as race 1, 25-minute race. It gives the same amount of points as race 1. The only difference is that it'll start with a reverse grid, meaning if you finished race 1 in first, you're going to start race 2 in last place, and if you finish race 1 in last, you're going to start race 2 at the front of the pack. But there you see from the countdown in the top left, 2 minutes left until we start race 1. But I will just take a quick second to show our grid. But here we have David in first in the Porsche. Next to him, we have Max in the BRZ. Yes. Alright, sorry about that. I'm back again. Yeah, just to go down our grid, in third place we have Keith in the Murcielago. Followed by him will be Brian in the Subaru Legacy. And then in fifth we have Elian in the Toyota MRS. Followed by Seamus in sixth in the Subaru Legacy all-wheel drive as well. In seventh, we have Eric in the 350Z, followed by Eric Waters, and then Cole. But it is almost lights out here at Zolder for race 1, and we are set to begin. It is now lights out, and away we go. Eric has stalled his car. Eric is far back behind. So Eric went a lap down. I don't know what happened with his start, but it seems like he almost stalled the car out and was not able to get a good start. Sorry about that. I got very distracted with that. But going back to the grid, at the moment, David leads the race by just over a second. We're currently looking at the battle for P2 though. This is between Elian and Keith. Keith is in second, Elian in third. We also, Keith will have a spin though. Keith is into the wall. Huge mistake there from him. He's down into sixth place now. Although Cole is quickly approaching him, so he may lose that position as well. But Keith has lost control. That pushes him back. But drivers now going side by side. I believe that was Brian going off into the grass. But there you see them 3 wide now. Eric has come out in front. Eric is sitting in third. Elian's in second at the moment. Seamus has overtaken Brian for fourth. But there you see Brian almost losing control. You saw his car get almost completely sideways, drifts through that corner, but he's able to maintain control. But Cole is now off track and into the gravel. That'll be 7th place loss for Cole. He now moves back into 8th. Costly mistake there from Cole as Max put the pressure from behind. Pressure proved to be too much for Cole as he had a big spin, which allows Max to make the easy overtake. But we're now back looking at the battle for, this is the battle for, I believe, P4. Yeah, so this is, although no, now it's the battle for P3 because Eric, who is in third, has just gone off track. That's made him lose his position to Brian. Although Seamus also went off track. Seamus has lost a ton of spots. He's now down into 7th. But Brian was the winner of that battle. Avoided all the incidents, came out ahead, and now he's putting pressure on Elian for 2nd place. Brian had a big run going down the straightaway. Seemed to have a ton more straight line speed in comparison to Elian. But the two of them are now going side by side heading down the start finish. Brian has the inside line, or no, sorry, Elian has the inside line. Brian has the outside line, but Brian breaks late. He's off into the gravel. Keith breaks late as well. Keith is also off into the gravel. That mistake from Brian, though, allows Eric to slip by in the white 350Z. The two drivers are now side by side. Eric went ahead for a split second, but now tucked right back behind Brian and is right back where he was a few turns ago in P4, although he's still very much putting the pressure on Brian. 4 minutes down in the race, 21 minutes left to go. Still plenty left to race here at Zolder. This is only race 1 of 2, so we have seen some of the drivers making mistakes. Luckily, they'll have another race to redeem themselves. But Eric has just set his fastest lap of his session. And David continues to lead the race with now an 8-second lead. Commanding lead for David as he makes his way through Sector 3 in the Porsche 911 996. But there you see David going through the chicanes as he completes his lap here at Zolder. The gap is now 8.8 seconds. He's also put up the fastest lap of the entire race with a 133.6. That would, of course, earn him an extra 2 points for fastest lap if he's able to hold on. So for all these drivers, no matter where they are in the standings for the race, they still have plenty left to fight for until the very end. Getting that fastest lap would earn them an extra 2 points, even if you finish in last place. So it's a quick race, definitely a sprint race format, but there's always something to race for on every single lap of these races here in the Super GT League. But at the moment, Keith sits in 5th with a half a second gap to Eric, who's in front of him in the 350Z. Brian has now pushed back into P3. Didn't see what happened there with him. He might have had a small self-inflicted error there, but Elian has now moved up into P2. There you see the beautiful sunrise here at Zolder in the background. But Brian has a huge run and is able to stick it. Wow, that was a massive overtake there from Brian. Brian was very confident going into that turn, was carrying a ton more speed than Elian to the point where it looks like he was going to go way off track, but he was able to somehow keep control of the car and stick it on track and complete the overtake for P2. I think one of the better overtakes that we've seen so far, but Brian hits the curbing. That is the brutal sausage curb that'll offset your entire car, and that's exactly what we saw as Brian once again almost went completely sideways but is able to save it. I think that all-wheel drive is definitely helping him out, but Eric has had a spin. He is now slowed down but centered back on track. Eric now has about 30 seconds to make up in order to gain any sort of positions, but at the moment he's currently in P9. But Elian has fallen further back behind Brian. Elian's now 2 seconds behind. The closest gap at the moment is between Max and Seamus. This is the battle for P6. Max is driving the black liveried HKS Subaru BRZ that you see there in the back. Seamus rocking the orange livery on the Subaru Legacy, the all-wheel drive version, just like Brian and Cole are driving. But at the moment, the gap between the two drivers is a half of a second. Looking at the timing board to my right, Seamus's last lap was a 134.42. Max's last lap was a 134.49. So the two drivers basically mirroring each other's lap times. At the moment, Seamus continues to hold them off, but 16 minutes left to go. Still plenty left to race for. Plenty of defending left to do for Seamus if he wants to hold on to that P6. But he's also going to have his head down and his eyes ahead of him. But just as I say that, Max has a spin. Max is off into the grass. That'll cost him about 5 seconds, and that gives Seamus far less to worry about in terms of his mirror. And now Seamus can put his head down and focus on the driver in front, which is Keith in the Lamborghini Murcielago. Keith is just about 2.5 seconds ahead of Seamus. So Seamus has plenty of work to do in order to gain more positions, but going off track like he just did is not going to gain him any time over Keith. But he did just beat out Keith's last lap time despite going off track by a tenth of a second. But at the moment, the battle between P3, 4, and 5 is heating up. Elian is currently the leader of this battle in third in the Toyota. Eric is just 5 tenths behind him in the Nissan 350Z. And then behind Eric is Keith in the Murcielago, sitting just 4 tenths behind Eric. So these three drivers are separated by just about 1 second between all three of them. So I actually just heard the sound of gear shifting and looked over, and Eric Bustillos, who we're currently watching in the 350Z, Eric is using the H pattern. Very bold move and adventurous move from Eric. these cars do have the H patterns available, but all drivers are electing to use the paddle shifters. Only some have the option of using the H pattern. That would be for this week, Max, Elian, Eric Waters, and then Eric Bustillos. Those 4 drivers being on our best Ultimate GT sims. But Eric has decided to go with the H pattern. It's putting him at a big disadvantage over the other drivers. I don't know if this is by choice or not, but he never asked me to change it, so I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to try something different for this week. But we're gonna jump ahead in the battle for P3 because Keith has just overtaken Elian for P3. Keith's last lap time was 1.2 seconds quicker than Elian's last lap time. So Elian seems to be struggling. There you see him cutting the chicane and braking late in order to avoid the incident with Keith. But yeah, I don't know what it is so far with Elian, but he just doesn't seem to have the pace that he usually does. This car is, the Toyota MRS is much less of a power car and more of like, at least, in my opinion, much more of a agility and handling car. So maybe it has a disadvantage down into into all these straights here at Zolder. Our other tracks for the league will be much less straight line and have many more turns, much lower speed, medium speed tracks. So I think the high speed may not be suiting Elian's car, but he's still hanging on, and at the moment is sitting 5/10 behind Keith in the battle for P3. Max has a spin. Max is now trying to recover, but that'll lose him some time over Seamus. Max had about a 3-second gap to Seamus before that spin, but now sits way behind. There is currently an error with the timing board. Seamus is not in third. I don't know why. Just showed that he moved up. At the moment, Seamus is in 6th place. So excuse me for the technical difficulties. The timing board now looks to be restored though. All the drivers that you see in the top left, this is their true positions. So at the moment, Seamus is in 6th, 2 seconds behind Eric in 5th. 2 seconds ahead of Eric is Elian in 4th. Keith is in 3rd. Ahead of him is Brian. And then David continues to lead the race. His gap has only increased throughout the duration of this race so far. But at the moment, David is ahead by 12 seconds. He also holds the fastest lap of the race. David has a 1:33.23. That is just 1/10 quicker than Brian's fastest lap of a 1:33.33. So Brian would need to improve by 1/10 of a second in order to get the extra 2 points for fastest lap. But at the moment, those points would be going to David. Ellian continues to put the pressure on Keith. At the moment, Ellian is just a few tenths behind, but Ellian goes off into the grass, getting a little eager with that braking point. Brakes a little too late, and that'll lose him some time and now allow Eric to get on the rear bumper of Ellian. Ellian went from putting the pressure on Keith to now having the pressure put on him by Eric. Eric is now flirting with the move on the outside, but doesn't have enough of a run to do so. But he continues to go side by side with Ellian, dipping his front tires next to the rear tires of Ellian. He's going to attempt the move now on the inside, and he's able to do so for now. Beautiful move there from Eric as he completes the overtake for P4. Got the run down the inside, remained well behind Ellian, getting into the draft of him down the straightaway, and then tucked into the inside, leading up into the turn. Had the beautiful move there. Eric, though, the fighting from these two drivers has now given room for Keith to improve on his gap between the two drivers. Keith is now a second and a half ahead of both Eric and Ellian. But David seemed to have made a mistake, because David is now only 5.5 seconds ahead of Brian. I say it like it's not a lot of time, but just a few laps ago, David had about a 15-second gap. I don't know when that gap diminished, but must have been a big mistake there from David that we missed. But only 3 minutes left to go here at Zolder. All David would need to do is just keep it on track and keep his lap times consistent, and he'll be able to get P1 in his first race. If Brian's able to hold on to this result, it would be a very strong performance from him, currently sitting in second. Eric is now putting the pressure on Keith, although he does get a little loose, trying to avoid the incident there. Almost smashes into the rear bumper. And there you see David exiting the pit lane. David must not have got enough fuel, so David has to pit. And now, again, the timing board is off, but David is now in 5th place. Moves from 1st all the way down to 5th from that pit stop, which means Brian is now leading the race. David is a second behind Elion. So a ton of time and positions lost there in pit lane from David. A big mistake, possibly due to setup and underfueling the car. But Eric now continues to put pressure on Keith and gets sideways once again. But the race is now on its final lap, and Brian has crossed the line to claim P1 in race 1 of week 2. A strong performance there from Brian, and there you see the rest of the drivers crossing the line. Keith will hold off for P2. Eric is not able to make the move over him, so Eric will finish in P3. Elian finishes in 4th, followed by David and then Seamus. Max is now making his way around the final chicane to cross the line for P7. Not the race Max would have been looking for. Eric has crossed the line already for P9. And our last driver is Cole, who is just about to cross the line for P8. But that is it for race 1. Plenty of action so far. Brian claims the win. Keith and Eric are the other podium sitters. And there you see Cole about to make his way through the final chicane to cross the line for P8. But I don't know what happened there with David, but that pit stop ended up moving him from 1st all the way down into 5th. So yeah, that is all from race 1. I will be back in a minute or two for the start of race 2. Just want to make sure that I get this replay saved. But yeah, so we now have about a 3 to 4 minute break before we begin race 2. But it is a reverse grid. So the starting order, Cole will start race 2 in 1st. Eric will be next to him starting in 2nd. Eric Waters, that is. And then behind them will be Eric Bustillo starting in 3rd, with Seamus starting in 4th. Brian will start the race in last place after winning race 1. But yeah. I will be right back in about 3 minutes for the start of race 2. If you guys don't already, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell to get notifications anytime we go live. This is Apex One. We are Sim Racing Lounge in Westfield, New Jersey. This is the Super GT League, week 2 of 5. We currently run this league every Sunday at 8 o'clock. So you guys can also tune in next Sunday at 8 for week 3. But we're also doing a Formula 4 league at the moment. That race is every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So you guys can also catch those live streams on this channel every Wednesday at 8. But other than that, we will actually be live next Wednesday. We're actually taking a bye week from the Formula 4 League, and we will be doing a endurance race. So we're going to be doing a Lime Rock Park endurance 2-hour race with touring cars. So should be good. 2 hours, 15 touring cars on the grid. That includes the Civic. You also have the Audi RS3 in there. There's a Peugeot in there, as well as an Alfa Romeo. So plenty of cars to choose from. I think about 8 cars to be exact. Later, Mike. But that should be a good race. We're going to go live for the start of that at 7:30 this upcoming Wednesday. But yeah, a minute left to go until the start of race 2. So I will be right back in about just under a minute. And it is now lights out and away we go. We are back for race 2. Things are getting crazy early on though. Drivers are 4 wide, others are 3 wide. A spin though. I believe that was Seamus. Seamus spins. Brian has also gotten hit into. At the moment, David is leading the race. Keith is behind him in second. Behind him is Eric in third, although Max is putting plenty of pressure here on Eric. Max is just behind Eric, and then just behind Max is Eric Bustillos. Eric hits Keith. Keith is off track. Eric is off as well. And that sends Eric into the wall, down into 8th place, although he's going to spin trying to recover back on track. Eric has now moved down into 9th. David continues to hold the lead. We're now looking at Brian making a move over Eric Bustillos, and he's able to complete the overtake for P3. Alien is now close behind Eric. Alien will also be looking to make an overtake over Eric, hopefully soon. And Eric slows down, brakes too late, it seems like, into the turn, which makes way for Alien to complete the move for P4. The driver's now forming a train. Alien is now going to look to make an overtake over Eric Waters. Here you see from our helicopter cam, he is able to do so. Eric Bustillos also wiggles by Eric Waters. A double overtake there from both drivers, passing the lap driver. The gaps between most of the drivers have increased. David continues to hold the lead, now by just under 4 seconds. The closest battle at the moment is between Seamus, who's in P7, and Keith, who's in P6 in the Lambo. The two drivers are separated by a half a second, although Keith will now be facing his first blue flag driver of the day in Eric Waters, and Keith already slows down a little, but in order to avoid an incident, Seamus slams on the brakes as well and loses some lap time. But yeah, in front of Keith in the auto box, that orange car, that is Eric Waters, who's a lap down. So Eric is the blue flag driver and is now going to be facing immense pressure from Keith. I know Keith is going to be looking to make the overtake as soon as possible in order to relieve himself of some of that pressure he's currently facing from Seamus. But at the moment, the two drivers are only separated by 0.2 of a second. Keith goes off track. I don't know how that happened, but he just snapped his wheel to the right. It was a left-hand turn. I don't know if he maybe locked up the brakes and wanted to avoid having a bigger incident. But Keith goes right when the turn went left, and that makes way for Seamus to go right through and make the clean move for P6. Seamus is now behind the blue flag driver, although he is able to make the move over the inside as Eric Waters misses the apex. But that is P6 now secured for Seamus. So we're going to jump further up the grid. We're now looking at Alien in the Toyota MRS, who's currently sitting in P4. Alien continues to struggle in terms of lap times. His fastest lap is a 1:34.2. At the moment, the current leader of the fastest lap is David with a 1:32.9. So David is sitting 1.3 seconds ahead of Alien in terms of fastest lap. I think that Porsche is definitely suited to Zolder. Max did just run the fastest first sector of the race though, and he ended up actually destroying David's lap time. Max just put up a 1:32.3, which is 0.6 quicker than David's fastest lap and way quicker than the entire rest of the grid. So Max is lighting things up at the moment, and he is decreasing the gap. The gap is now 3.1 seconds, whereas just 2 laps ago the gap was 4 seconds. Still 16 minutes left to go, so plenty of time left in the race left for Max. But at the moment he still has a lot of work to do, but we're gonna go on board with him for the next lap or two to see what he can do. Just looking at the last lap times, David's last lap was a 1:33.1. Max's last lap was a 1:33.3. So David continues to hold on. 13 minutes left to go in this race. Max still holds the fastest lap of the race by 0.6. The closest gap at the moment, though, is between Elion and Eric. Elion's currently in 4th, 4 seconds ahead of Eric, who's in 5th in the 350Z. Brian has just put up a very good lap time. Brian put up a 1:32.5. That is the second fastest lap of the race so far, just 0.2 slower than Max's fastest lap. So Brian would need to improve by 0.2 in order to gain those 2 extra points. Still 11 minutes left to go in the race, so plenty of time for him to do so. We're just over halfway through race 2 of week 2 here at Zolder. David continues to lead by just over 3 seconds. Elion is still in 4th. The gap between him and Eric is now 8 seconds. And Eric is now off track. Eric has gone into the gravel, is now back out on track, but is a lap down from the driver in front, which is Cole, sitting in 7th in the Subaru Legacy all-wheel drive. And the gap between Max and David is now just under, or for a second it was just under 3 seconds. So it's now back above 3 seconds. 9 minutes left to go in the race, but this race has been much less eventful. Another spin though from Eric as he goes off track in the auto box. But we've seen far less action in this race. Definitely been a more relaxing race for most of the drivers out on track. Although David has continued to dominate just as he did in race 1. I wasn't able to talk to him at the conclusion of race 1, so I don't know what happened, whether he ran out of fuel or something else. But he's once again proven that he's one of the faster drivers here at Zolder. And this time around, he'll just be hoping to actually bring it home for that P1. The gap is now 2 seconds between David and Max. Max continues to cut those lap times down. Before David's pit stop, we did see a similar drop off. David's last lap was a 134 and Max's last lap was a 132.8. Looking at the sector times in this current lap, Max just made up 0.2 over David in sector 1. Two drivers are soon going to be approaching the end of sector 2. David put up a 28.8 in sector 2, while Max put up a 28.6 in sector 2. So a second sector in a row where Max makes up 0.2 of a second. The gap is now 1.7 seconds between the two drivers, and the gap continues to go down. I'm actually going to take a look over at David's screen. I'll be right back. I just want to check on his tire wear, see how he's doing, because definitely seems to be dropping off in lap times. The gap is also getting closer between Eric Bustillos and Brian. The battle for P4, still 2.5 seconds separates the two drivers. Only 4.5 minutes left to go in the race, so not much time for Eric to make up the time over Brian. David has also picked up on his lap times, in the last lap at least. David put up a 33.2, while Max put up a 33.5. So that'll relieve some of the pressure from David. And David has just got massively slowed down from the blue flag driver. That ended up costing David about a second. And now Max is just less than half a second away from David. Well within the slipstream now. 3 minutes left to go. He's going to be putting a lot of pressure on David as this race concludes. Max has a huge mistake, and that'll cost him all of his time. As you see, Eric Waters going off track, but a huge mistake there from Max, which means he's going to lose all of his time, get well out of the slipstream of David, and I think that'll now be P2 in the books for Max. Unfortunately, won't be enough for first. David continues to lead the race, but just a minute left here to go in the final race of the week. And there you see it, final lap notification at the top. David and Max have crossed the line. P1 for David, P2 for Max. Elion is about to cross the line. And there it is, P3, a podium finish for Elion in the Toyota. Brian has now crossed the line for P4. Followed by him will be Eric in the 350Z, finishing race 2 in 5th. Keith will be crossing the line for 6th, and then Cole will soon be crossing the line for 7th. And that is all, folks. That is the end of the race, the end of week 2 here at Zolder. Plenty of fireworks in race 1. Race 2 was a little bit more laid back, although we saw a very dominant performance from David in the second race. Late fireworks in race 1 from David as well. He was dominating the whole race, but then had to make a pit stop at the very end, which ended up dropping him way back into, I believe, 6th place. But congratulations to David, Max, and Elion for finishing in the podium for race 2. But that is all here at Zolder, here from Apex 1 in Westfield, New Jersey. I will be signing off now, and I will be seeing you guys this upcoming Wednesday for our 2-hour Lime Rock Park TCR endurance race. So thank you guys all for tuning in. And again, if you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell so you get notified